So yesterday we were looking at a concept called as working with multiple objects. And today we'll take up some concepts like operator overloading, and we'll also take up inheritance. So I'm trying to create a new project. And I'm calling this as operator overloading example. So if you remember yesterday's program where we were working with multiple objects. But when I was working with multiple objects, I was not able to type like this. We were actually not able to add objects like this. So z equal to x plus y is an invalid statement because these operators cannot be used with objects. That is the default behavior of the compiler. So, but now we will make it a valid statement today. So I'm actually doing the same stuff what we did yesterday. We have a class called as employee. And I'm creating a couple of only one variable in this example called as salary. So as usual, I'm having some simple functions like accept. So we have accept and we have display functions. And here we are asking the user to enter the salary. And here we're just trying to print the salary. So in the main function, like yesterday, I'm creating a couple of objects. So we have X and we have Y. So we are asking the user to enter the data. So that is the simple stuff. So we have three different objects. Asking the user to enter the values for both the objects. I'm trying to add them by saying z equal to x plus y. So obviously this is giving me an error. This is an invalid statement because operators cannot be used with objects by default. But now we'll make that. So yesterday, to solve this problem, in place of plus symbol, we have actually taken some function. So I was trying to say z equal to x dot sum of y. Today, this logic will be absolutely same. So you see, for example, I'm trying to say public employee. Yesterday, this is how I did. This is how I did, and the code was absolutely same. So this is how we were doing. But today we'll make some changes. First of all, what is the operator we're trying to overload is the plus. So in place of sum, I put plus. But you need to put a keyword called as operator just before the plus symbol. And this function must be declared as static. So we have public static employee operator plus. There's one more change. You know, there are two different types of operators, like binary operators and unary operators. So plus is obviously a binary operator which is actually working on two objects, which is actually working on two operands, we should say, two objects. So it's a binary operator. Yesterday I said if you want to work with n objects, you have to pass n minus 1. But today, if you want to work with n objects, you have to pass n in this syntax. So here I need to pass both the objects, employee of x comma employee of y. And I can say t dot salary equal to x dot salary plus y dot salary. T dot salary equal to x dot salary plus y dot salary, and we simply return t. Interestingly, now this statement is not giving me any error. Now if I run this code, so the first guy gets 1000, the second guy gets 2000, the sum is coming up as 3000. So we are able to work with multiple objects using operators this time, unlike yesterday where I have really struggled to write so many sum functions. And also you remember yesterday the sum function was overloaded by me. So whenever I wanted to work with 3 objects, 4 objects, 5 objects, we were writing so many multiple sum functions. But today with the operator overloading functionality, I can add as many objects as I can. So this single function can add any number of objects. So it's not necessary, this is the only operator that I can overload. So I can actually copy this and paste it for another 3 times for subtraction, multiplication, and division. So here I will say subtraction, and here I will say multiplication, and here I will say division. So for subtraction I say x dot salary minus y dot salary. This is multiplication. Sometimes some people try to be a bit tricky, so they try to overload the division operator, but they add internally. So whenever you try to divide, it actually adds. So we shouldn't do that. We should not change the actual behavior of the operator. So overall, I have overloaded plus, minus, multiplication, division, all the 4 operators. Now let me have a couple of objects. Suppose we're trying to say employee of P equal to new of employee. Employee of Q equal to new of employee. Okay, sorry, let's continue. So we have 4 different objects here. So now I'm trying to say P dot accept as well and Q dot accept as well. So we are actually prompting the user to enter the data for these 4 objects. Now I want to say x plus y minus P multiplied by Q we want to have one more guy here called as R. like this. So we have x plus y plus, maybe we can say multiplied by p minus q divided by r. So if anybody looks at this statement, they actually think you're doing some calculations. But how many of you actually think we're actually calling four functions there? Plus is a function, multiplication is a function, subtraction is a function, and division is a function. These are all functions. So if I test this code now, let's say salary is 2,000 for x, this is y, so obviously x plus y is 3,000. X plus y is 3,000 and p is 2,000, q is 1998, that's around p minus q is 2, so 3,000 into 2, 6,000, 6,000 by 2 is 3,000. Perfect. So all operators I have overloaded now. All arithmetic operators, all binary operators we have overloaded. Perfect. So we can always go ahead and try to overload the unary operators as well. So for example, if I can copy this, for unary operators it is plus plus, right? And unary means only one, so when we have to pass only one object. So generally plus plus increases the value by 1, but now we try to say x dot salary equal to plus equal to 1,000. That means whenever you say plus plus, you want to actually increase the salary by 1,000. Similarly, I can copy this, I can paste this. This is minus minus. This is minus equal to, let's say, 500. So if you wish to actually use subtraction of minus minus, then it should be subtracted by 500. So you can define your own functionality. That's the advantage of operator overloading. Plus plus by default increases by 1. Minus minus by default decreases by 1. But now we are increasing by 1,000 and we're decreasing by 500. It's up to us. Now let's test that. So here I say z plus plus, and here also z dot display. Then I say z minus minus, and then I say z dot display. So obviously last time we got the result here as 3,000, so this should be 4,000 and this should be 3 files here on that. So 2,000, 1,000, 2,000, 1998, 2, it's okay. This is z plus plus and this is z minus minus. So this is how we are actually able to overload so many operators, binary as well as unary. So unless you overload these operators, they cannot be used. Suppose if somebody wants to say if x is greater than y, suppose I want to say x gets paid well, else y gets paid well. So again, this statement is incorrect because I cannot use operators with offsets. So I have to overload the relational operator greater than. The greater than operator is working on how many objects? 2. So it's a binary operator again. So now in this case, I'll again write a new function, public static employee operator greater than. Here, the return data type is actually bool. Okay, it actually returns a Boolean true false, unlike my previous functions where it was returning some actual value. So here I will say return of x dot salary is greater than y dot salary. So if x dot salary is above y salary, it returns true, else it returns false. So there is certain rule here. If you're overloading greater than operator, you must also overload less than operator. And if you don't listen to me and if you build the solution, you get the same error. Before that, let's see, we got some other problem here. It should be fine. Let's run this. So now it tells me the operator greater than requires a matching operator less than to also be defined. So it's pretty simple. I can simply copy this function. I can change this to less than, and I can change this to less than as well. Perfect. So although we haven't used less than anywhere in the program, but it's a rule that you must overload both of them. Let's run the code. So now if I say 2000, 1000, 2000, 1998, now it tells me X gets paid well. So this is how I'm actually able to overload so many operators. So at the end of the day, compared to yesterday's program, this is much easier. I can simply work with objects the way we work with any ordinary variable. So that's the purpose of operator overloading. So all these days we were just working up with one class called as employee. So but when you want to work with multiple classes, and that's the time we have another concept called as inheritance. Let's try that. I'm trying to close this solution, create a new project, and we call this as inheritance demo. So in this example, I want to show you one concept called as order of execution of constructors and destructors in inheritance. What does it mean? For example, I have a class called as first, and then I have a class called as second. So inheritance is obviously meant for what? Reusability purpose. For example, you have written some nice functionality for one project, one application. The same code you might need it in the second project as well. So in that case, you can simply inherit your class in the second project with the class in the first project. So you obviously you get all the code, whatever is returned in the first class into the second class. So inheritance is mainly meant for reusability purpose. Now in inheritance you always have two classes, parent class and child class. So obviously in this example I want my first to be parent and second to be child. So how do you do that? You simply put a colon symbol and you put the base class name. This is inheritance. The second class is now inherited from first class. So whatever is there in the first class I can access from second class now. Again, you can only access the public elements of the first class and protected elements of the first class, but not private elements. Inheritance doesn't mean you can access everything of first class. Inheritance doesn't break the concept of private. Private elements of the first class can still be cannot accessed in its own child classes, but public and protected elements can be accessed. I'll demonstrate that in a while, but in the meanwhile, I'm trying to have a small function here. It's a constructor. You know what is a constructor and you know what is a destructor. So here I want to put a small message from first class constructor, and here I want to say message from first class destructor. And then similarly in the second class I'm having my own constructor and I'm having my own destructor as well. Okay, so overall I haven't done great things. So I just have two classes, and one class is inherited with another class, and both are having their own constructors and destructors. So as I said, like when you have inheritance in place, the second class can access everything of the first class. So mostly when you have inheritance in place, I don't have to create an object of my parent class. My child class object is sufficient. Now if I create an object of my second class and I simply close this program, you can see here in this example I'm not creating any object of my first class. It's just the second class object, which is a child class. So when I say new of second, obviously you guys know it actually calls the constructor, and I should see the message from second class constructor. And the program has ended, so it has to find the destructor. So I should see the message from second class destructor. But when I run this program, very interestingly, it's saying message from first class constructor and message from second class constructor. And when I press enter, it's very fast, but the message is message from second class destructor and message from first class destructor. Let me show you that as well. So you can see first class constructor, second class constructor, second class destructor, first class destructor. So that clearly tells you constructors are always executed from top to bottom and destructors vice versa. So when I was actually creating an object of the second class, it has actually fired the constructor, but by then it has realized it got inherited with the first, so it goes and executes the first class constructor and then its own constructor. When it comes to destruction, it destroys itself first before it destroys the base class object. So this is how you need to understand when inheritance is in place. The default constructor of child class automatically calls the default constructor of the base class. That's the point you have to make. By default, it does that. If you feel you want to do by yourself, yes, you can simply say base off. This is actually simple. I mean, similar to whether you write, you don't write, the output is same. Default is this is assumption. This is assumed. So you don't have to write by yourself. Perfect. So that's the first example. Let's try another exercise called as inheritance 2. Let's say in this example, I'm coming back to same old classes like employee, and this time I'm also taking another class called as allowances. I want this allowances class to be inherited with employee class. See, what you need to understand, suppose if you take an employee in an organization, the company might be storing around 100 fields of information about that guy. But taking all the 100 fields in one class is not recommended. Suppose you may be having some his personal information, so you can have a personal employee class, and you may be having his some salary details that can be in some salary class, allowances detail, deductions. So basically you have to split the information of that guy into multiple classes, so each class can be handled independently, but all these classes will be derived from the base class employee. So that's how in real time you have to take so many classes in place. So in my example, I've got two classes, employee and allowances, and allowances is inherited from the employee class. So .NET supports only single inheritance. That means one class can only be inherited from one class. Unlike in C++, a class can be inherited from so many classes. But here, a class can only be inherited from one class. So in the employee class, I'm having a couple of variables. By default, if you don't mention private or public, variables are treated as private variables. I'm having a couple of functions like accept. I'm also having another function called as display. So I'm just asking the user to enter the values for equal. C is for salary. Okay, so we are asking the user to enter the data, and then I have a display function where I'm simply trying to print the values. So similarly, in the allowances class, I'm having some house rent allowance, some conveyance allowance, some mobile allowance. And here also, I'm trying to have some functions like input. And I have some functions like, say, output. You can note down here, intentionally, I have not given these function names as accept and display. Because when you have inheritance in place, if both child class and base class have functions with the same name, it actually creates some conflicts. Of course, we'll see how to solve that problem later. But in the meanwhile, let me get the values for the C is for CA. Okay, so overall, what you can understand now, we have two classes. The first class has three variables and two functions. The second class also has three variables and two functions, nothing else. Now, once I'm in the main function, I'm creating an object of my child class. You know that when you have an inheritance, we never have to have create an object of the base class. Now, interestingly, when I say x dot, can you see here accept and display? But in reality, accept and display belongs to employee class. But now I'm able to call my base class functions with my child class object. So when I say x dot accept, it calls the employee class accept function. And then I say x dot input, it calls its own function. And I can say x dot display, I can say x dot output. Everything is perfect. So now you know how you can call functions of other base classes as well. So let's run this. So employee class, that's okay. So everything is perfect. So what is being demonstrated as of now, how I can call base class functions with child class objects is what I want to show you. All this is happening because of this single step. If I remove the inheritance now this will give me an error because x doesn't have an accept function. So that's the nice thing about inheritance. Now imagine I want to calculate some kind of bonus on the salary. So I have a new function here, something like say calculate. Here I want to say something like say bonus equal to salary into 10%. Okay, so I want to calculate some bonus on salary. Perfect. But interestingly, even in my child class, I'm taking another function called as calculate. And here I want to calculate some kind of let's say net salary. So, okay, so what I want to do here, net salary should be HRA plus CA plus MA plus salary. But very interestingly, when I'm typing salary, it's not showing me salary here. Okay, so what's my intention? I'm trying to say net salary equal to HRA plus CA plus MA. All these things belongs to my own class. That's fine. But this salary belongs to the base class. But I said earlier, you can access everything of the base class except private elements. By default, these variables are private, so this variable cannot be used in other outside that class. So first thing, how do I solve this problem? How can I access salary of employee class into allowances? Very simple. You can make this variable as protected. You can make this variable as protected. So when I say protected int salary, now I don't see that problem. But interestingly now, we now have two calculate functions. So if I'm in the main function and if I say x dot calculate, which function will it call? So if I run the code, employee name, salary, something. So am I not printing anything? Yeah. So when I run this code, so it's actually showing me net salary as 160. But it is not calculated. This is actually calling its own function. It's not calling this calculate function. This is called as overriding. So if both base class and child class have functions with the same name, if both base class and child class have functions with the same name, it's actually called as overriding. So, so how do I ensure that I want to call the base class calculate function as well? If you remember last time, so we were calling the base class default constructor from the child class default constructor. So in the same way, what you have to do in the calculate function of the child class, you should say base.calculate. This is called as overriding, pretty much like super in Java. So when I say base.calculate, then it actually calls the base class calculate function. Now if I run the code, so now you can see bonus as 400, and you can also see net salary. So that clearly tells you now I'm able to call the calculate function of both the classes. So this is most important here. So whenever you have function names duplicated between the classes, and this is the best example, this is the best way, you have to use the keyword base.calculate. Perfect. But you have some kind of warning here, because whenever the function name is duplicated between the classes, you better use the word new. To solve this overriding problem, we have to use the word new just before the written data type. Now I don't see that warning as well. So whenever your function name is duplicated in the child class, you better put a keyword called as new, so it actually hides this function when this function has to be called. Perfect. So that's how in this example I have explained you so many things. The concept of protected, the concept of overriding, and calling base class functions with child class, all these things. So in reality, I don't have to have an object of employee class in this program. But if you still go ahead and try to create, that's okay. It doesn't create any problem. Okay, so let me show you one more program. But as usual, I take a minute's time to prepare my hot water. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, so let's try one more program related to inheritance. Okay, I'll do something. I'll open up the same program. I'll try to demonstrate to you very quickly the other stuff as well in 9 minutes. So, okay, let me show you something here. Suppose in my employee class, of course, I wasn't having any constructor. Let me put my constructor. So this is a default constructor where I'm not writing anything. And then I'm writing a triple argument constructor. Okay, so we have e-code, we have salary, and we have e-name, and it's a triple argument constructor. So here I'm simply trying to say this e-code, e-name, and salary. So I have a default constructor and I have a triple argument constructor. So you might be wondering, if I have not written any code, why did I write this? You have to have a default constructor before you go for any other extra constructors. So I have a triple argument constructor. In the same way, in my 11th class, I'm writing a triple argument constructor. So earlier I have made a statement that the child class default constructor can automatically call the base class default constructor. But in this discussion, I have a triple argument constructor in my child class, but can it call the triple argument constructor of the base class? By default, it won't. That's what I want to show you here. So what is the best way? The only way, the child class constructor should receive the values related to the base class as well. So now I have a 6 argument constructor for 11th class. Whatever you need, okay, you use it here. Whatever you don't need, you send it back. to the base class constructor. So this is called as calling base class non-default constructor from the child class non-default constructors. Now if you of course I don't have to have this. I don't have to have this as well. I'll simply create some allowances of x equal to new of allowances of HRA is 100, CA is 200, MA is 300, employee code is 101, salary is so and so, and okay, so now these three encode ename and salary, which goes to the base class constructor, and I'm able to print my display, and I'm also able to print my output function. So if I run this code, you can see the display values from the employee class and the display values from the child class as well. So what I have demonstrated in this example, how a non-default constructor of child class can call the non-default constructor of base class. So the child class must receive all the values in the world, and then what it needs it can use in its own function. What it doesn't need, it can send it back to the base class function. So base is a keyword here. So this is how I have demonstrated to you so many things related to inheritance. So we have a concept called as sealed classes. For example, I do not want my employee class is a very confidential class, and I do not want anybody to inherit their classes with my class. So I can simply make the keyword called as sealed. Now if I build a solution, I get an error. Allowances cannot derive from sealed type employee. Now you can see this line is throwing me an error because this class cannot be inherited from employee class, which is a sealed class. So that's how you can actually restrict a class from participating in inheritance. Perfect. And also I said that when you have inheritance in place, the child class object can actually call the base class function, so we don't have to have an object of employee class at all. But what if you still go ahead and try to create an object of base class? It doesn't actually stop you. If I build a solution, I don't see any problem. I can still create an object of my base class. But how do I restrict people from creating an object of base class? Let's say I'm the base class owner, I'm the employee class owner, and you are the allowances class owner. So I don't mind if you inherit a class with my class and you call the functions of my class. But I do not want you to create an object of my class and play with the functions of my class. So as a base class owner, I can stop people from creating an object of my class by marking the class as abstract. If you make your class as an abstract, you cannot create an object of that class. Now I get an error here. You can see here, cannot create an instance of the abstract class or interface employee. So an abstract class is the one whose object you cannot create. Okay. So I've shown you sealed classes and I've shown you abstract classes, but I've just given you a simple example of abstract class. Tomorrow we'll take up more on abstract classes. We'll talk about interfaces. We'll talk about polymorphism and virtual functions tomorrow. I'll stop here.
Unmuted.
Yeah. If you have any questions, you can ask me now.
Hi, Narinder here. Yeah. So when you have non-default constructor, you shown me with one example, non-default default constructor from base class and in derived class, how is the calling. But in case if you have multiple non-default constructors at that time, like how the rule works while calling that base dot something, right? We call base class constructor, non-default constructor.
No, first of all, there can only be one default constructor.
Yeah, one default constructor, but there are non-default constructors, right? Here you are showing allowance, then you have non-default constructor.
Yeah, you have to do the same way, right? See, for example, here I'm calling what kind of constructor? Triple argument, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, if you have only single argument, then you'll say just base of e code. That's it. You'll stop the statement here.
If you have like a three, okay. Yeah, okay, I got it. So you can call any non
You can pass any number of values here.
Okay. So that calls the appropriate base class non-default based on the number of parameters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one more thing, like the new keyword, it hides the functionality of the base class, right?
Yeah.
Not the derived class.
It hides the functionality of the base class. That means now if you see, I think it's in the same code. Yeah. Initially, see by default, what actually happens when you say x dot calculate?
Yeah.
X is an object of allowances class.
Yeah.
So an object always gives preference to its own class functions first. It doesn't fire the employee class calculate function. It gives preference to its own class function. So when it comes here, and then from here you're actually calling the base class function. So until then, the base class calculate function is actually hidden from the use. You have to do this manually by yourself.
So when you say new, it doesn't call base class functionality. But if you want to implement that, you have to use base dot
See, whether you put new or you don't put new, the program is working fine even for us. But only thing is, I was actually getting a warning.
Yeah.
That please use the word new, something like that. But it's just a warning. It's not an error. So using new is optional as of now.
But yeah, okay. It's, anyhow, it hides the functionality of base class.
Yeah.
But if it hides how it's calling, then base dot calculate, then we're able to call, right?
It is hiding only at this statement.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay, guys. So I'll send you these programs in just around 5 minutes, and I'll see you tomorrow, same timings.
Yeah. Thanks. And one more thing.
Yeah.
I talked to my co-brother actually. He's gonna deposit the money. So I'm sorry about that. It actually was
no issues.
I couldn't follow it like when I got your email, as soon as I got it, I just called him and confirmed that he's gonna put cash.
Yeah, no props, man. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.